Check, check. All right, guys, I set some reference points for chairs. So just set them. No one go behind this reference point. Just keep setting more chairs up. That way you guys know where to stop going back. That is the back row. So just set up from there and you'll be good. You'll be good. You'll be good. If you have a proclivity, that means if you just can't help yourself to talk, then I would not sit next to someone you know you're going to be chatty. Chitty chat with, all right? No chatting. I'm just kidding. You guys can chat a little if his message is good. You can give me some amens. Here we go. Here we go. Aww. Everyone here so smart. This is so interesting right now. Yeah, that row is not supposed to be like that. Hey, you two come forward, slide in here. You two on the outside, go into this row. Why is this not? There we go. Here we go. I'm going to start setting the rows up, guys, if you are not capable of doing it. Here we go. There we go. There we go. Here. That's too classic. It was too funny, man. I had to laugh. It was pretty funny. All right, guys, we're going to start. I'm excited because we're closing up our series on Into the Badlands. We're actually calling this one Exiting the Badlands because we are done. If you do need a Bible, though, sometimes he accidentally grabs the Spanish ones and the children's ones. But if you need one, throw your hand up in the air. Wave it like you do care, all right, so he can get you one. Everyone say, thank you, Raul. Oh, man, that's so poor. Everyone say, thank you, Raul. Oh, man. Yeah. Don't fold under pressure, Raul. You got this. You got this. You got this. Hey, Zen, can you help him with the Bibles? Zen, can you help him with the Bibles? All right, we're good. We're good with Bibles now. We're good. All right, we're going to go ahead and start because we're got to get in this fast. We don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to use the time that we have. I'm trying to finish by 9 if we can. But I want to just talk to you guys right now as we've been going through a series called Into the Badlands. It is about getting beyond your stronghold, getting beyond that area of temptation. Raise your hand if you've been tempted this week, any shape, any area. You've had a struggle this week. Let's paraphrase it. You've had a struggle. You've had a problem this week that was hard to deal with, all right? Raise your hand if you had some drama this week. All right? Yeah, man. There's always some kind of drama. There's always stuff. There's always things, right? The point of this message is to give us hope, give us that light at the end of the tunnel to say, hey, even though it's tough, even though sin is a struggle in our life, it doesn't have to own our life. It doesn't have to be the message of our life because there is a better message, and that is the one Christ gives to us, and that is the new name that Christ gives to us when he calls us Christian, when he calls us changed, when he comes in and transforms our life. I was thinking about this week, and I said I was going to name this message today, Avoiding Regret. Avoiding regret. That's kind of the thing that none of us want to kind of have at the end of the day. We don't want to take a class and fail it and be like, oh man, I really regret that. We don't want to start a friendship with someone or a relationship with someone and say, I really regret that. We don't want to start a career, work towards our whole life to accomplish something and say, I regret that. But a lot of times, through bad decisions, we have regrets. I want to tell you guys a story about two guys. I want you guys to say Franz, and I want you guys to say Fritz. All right, these two guys were working in World War II. They were on the Nazi regime. These two guys were there, and they're in the trenches, all right? And they had been in these trenches, guys, they were full of dirt. And it wasn't just dirt. They couldn't leave the trenches because on the other side were the other powers. This was like Russia. These are all the other people. This is America. They're all fighting, right? And here are these two guys, Franz and Fritz, and they've been in this trench for 2 weeks straight. They haven't got a chance to shower. They hadn't got a chance to change anything, and they couldn't even go to the bathroom. So that trench became the bathroom, the waste area. That trench became everything for 2 weeks straight. And so they've been holding this trench for 2 weeks now, and their general comes in and he says, hey, guess what? I got some good news and some bad news. And I'm going to say it just like he would in German. He says, the good news is, because they always want the good news first, right? The good news is, he says, today all of you will get new underwear. All of you will get new change of underwear and new change of clothes. And so they said, all of you get new change of underwear. And so they all get these new change of underwear. All right, you have to say underwear. It's not underwear, it's underwear. All right, there you go, there you go. All right, so there was the bad news. Well, the bad news is Fritz, you change with Franz, and Franz, you change with Fritz. All right, you guys didn't get that. Did you get it? No? Did it pass you by? The good news is that they're getting underwear. The bad news is Fritz, you change your underwear with Franz. Franz, you change your underwear with Fritz. All right, what I'm trying to say is I'm making a joke, a light of how life is sometimes. How we think something good's going to come out of something bad, bad's going to come out of something good, and yet we're still left right where we started. I was trying to lighten the mood for you guys to get you to chuckle a little bit, but I see we got a tough crowd tonight. So I will never, ever joke again until next week. Till next week. All right, Zen, you're not welcome anymore. No, I'm just kidding. I love you. You can still come to my birthday party. All right. No, this week, guys, I want you guys to open up to Matthew 22:14. This is kind of where we're going to start today. Matthew 22:14. And this does not want to stay. There we go. Matthew 22:14. Do we got in the back there? In the back? You guys are doing great today. Great. Matthew 22:14. It says this in Matthew 22:14. It says, "For many are called, but few are chosen." Many are called, but few are chosen. Hey, can you shut that door? If they're going to talk, just shut it. Go ahead and shut the door, Allie. There you go. Almost. There you go. Awesome. She's so awesome. So we have this verse here, and you know what? It took me the longest to really catch on to this. Because I always felt like, man, is God being exclusive with the kingdom of heaven? He's saying, man, only certain people are allowed in. If I'm just good enough, if I do all the rules, if I clean my room every day, if I never make a mistake, am I allowed into the stairway of heaven? You know, song back from the 90s, you guys wouldn't know, Led Zeppelin. Anyway, if I'm allowed into heaven because I did X, Y, and Z, because I followed the commandments, because I did every good thing that God called me to do. I really struggle with this because to me as a kid, it sounded like perfection in my mind. I'm like, man, if I'm perfect, I can get into heaven. If I follow every single rule there is in the good book, the Bible, then I can get into heaven. And I feel like this is the disconnect with a lot of kids in our generation. We feel like we don't want to be in church, we don't want to sit in the pews, we don't want to come because we hear it and we think that, man, if I'm not this perfect person, then God can't accept me. And we even start to create this mentality that says, if I'm not a perfect person, God won't accept me. And that's just not the truth. It's not the truth at all. And in this verse, it actually talks about that. A better translation would say this: for many are invited. Think about getting invited to a party, right? For many are invited, but few show up. I want you to think about this. It's not that God hasn't chosen you. God is saying in scriptures, He has literally called out to each and every single person out there. See, we read the scripture sometimes and we kind of make inferences. That means that we'll take things that God is saying and trying to put meaning into it, but we don't understand the meaning. We don't understand what God's really trying to say to us. Like when we hear John 3:16, for God so loved the world, we're like, man, God loved that kid because He saved that kid, but He didn't save me yet. I don't really feel like God's working in my life. And we kind of take our feelings and we project them into God. And we say, well, maybe that person has found God, but I haven't experienced God yet. Maybe that person has experienced a change, but I haven't really experienced a change yet. And there's so many people are out there, I think they really want to experience God, but they aren't necessarily seeking God out. And here, I got to see something really special, is that God wants to have a personal relationship with every single person, regardless of where you're at in your life. That's crazy, right? That God, no matter what I'm doing, no matter the sin load that's on my shoulders, God still wants to sit down and have a conversation with me. God still wants to hang out with me, even though I am who I am. You guys got to understand that for God, all of your mistakes, all of your sin, everything is on blast. He knows every little detail that you've done, every mistake that you've done. And he says, guess what? Because of my grace, because of my goodness, you can still step in if you're willing to let that stuff go. God gives us a choice. And that's what it kind of comes down to here. He says, you're invited to the kingdom of heaven. You're invited into my house. But you know the craziest thing is, when I came back from college, I was like, I lived on my mom and dad's house. Raise your hand if you have a curfew at your house. You have a curfew. You don't come home at a certain time, you know you're going to get grounded. Bad things are going to happen. So all of you could stay out till 3 in the morning, nothing happens. You're good. Raise your hand if you have a curfew. Just raise it high. Or I'm going to be talking to some parents and be like, yo, your kid doesn't have a curfew. That's what they told me. You don't think I will? I will. Raise your hand if you got a curfew. Make it simple. All right. We got a good number of people. I know you're not proud of that because you're like, I'm a grown man. I'm a grown woman. Well, the reality is that you're still living in mom and dad's house, right? So you're in mom and dad's house, and the hardest thing for me to get over was I had a curfew. And it was crazy because it's like, you want to be on your own. You want to be your own person. And so I get out of my house, right? And now I'm in college, and I'm in college doing whatever I want. Mom and dad are at home. I went away to college, and there were no rules. I was on my own. And every single decision was what? My decision. But you know what the craziest thing is? Get this. I would come back for the holidays. And all of a sudden, grown man Mikey, 19, 20 years old, comes back, sits in my parents' house, and I said, hey, I'm going to go out. And it was the weirdest thing. They wanted me to be home at a certain time. And I was like, but I'm a grown man. I'm 20 years old. You can't ask me or expect me to be home at 2 o'clock in the morning. My friends, you hang out. Well, you know what mom and dad say, nothing good happens after 3 a.m. Nothing good happens after 2 a.m. But in my mind, I had what? My life set out. I thought I had these set rules and set stuff, but I found out every time I went home, if I wanted to be in mom and dad's house, I had to live underneath mom and dad's rules. And it's kind of like this. When God invites you into his kingdom, he's saying, you are all called in my house. You can all abide in my house. You can all come into the kingdom of God. Every single person is invited, but you got to go through my way. And see, the way for Christ is through a cross. And that cross, when you experience the cross of Christ, you experience a dying to self. Saying that, hey, if I'm going to come into God's house, that means I got to die to my rights, to myself. I have to die to what I'm kind of wanting to be, what I'm going through, and let God start putting some definitions into my life. And some conditions and some parameters in my life. And that was hard for me growing up. And so I read this verse, and I feel like I went right by it all the time because I didn't want it to be a reality. I wanted to kind of say that God never called me. That God hasn't really placed a calling on my life. That's Thomas's thing. Thomas preaches, man, I'm just Mike. I go to parties, I do my own thing, I like hanging out. That's Thomas. Thomas is the goody-goody, I do my own thing. And the crazy thing is I would come back to this, and I'm like, man, there's still a calling that I'm not dealing with. See, you can sugarcoat it any way you want. God has called each and every one of you to a ministry experience, but if you don't step into it, what are you stepping into? The world. And when you're in the world, you're not in God's kingdom. You're not in God's protection. You're not living in God's path. You're not living in God's provision. You're not living in God's blessing. You're living in sin. And it took me the longest time to where I had a relationship with God, but I hadn't surrendered to the lordship of God. To knowing that not only has God invited me, but I can actually show up. That God's got a place with my name on it, and he says, man, I want to dwell with you. Will you dwell with me? And so we have this, for many are invited, but few show up. Many are called, but few are chosen. The one that are chosen is the one who receives the gospel. I want you guys to open up to John chapter 15, verse 18. Some of you guys read this at camp. If you were at summer camp, we talked about this. But if you weren't, man, we're going to solidify this again. It's John chapter 15, verse 18. And this kind of really just narrows it down. What is Jesus trying to say? What does Jesus mean by this idea of many are called, but few are chosen? It says here, if the world hates you, understand that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. Now, I want you guys to see this, man. You guys know this. There are certain things that if you do on YouTube, you'll go viral. If you do something crazy, you'll go viral. And you'll get a bunch of likes, and you know what the world likes. But if you go on Twitter account, you know what people like. They put likes on there. Same thing with Instagram. Same thing with Facebook. You know, if you do something at school, there are things that kids will say, oh man, that's awesome. And all of a sudden overnight, what? That person that wasn't popular becomes popular because he did something that connected and related to a bunch of other kids. Now, it seems super superficial, but it's the reality. There are certain things that the world does that the world likes. And when you call those things out, you go against the mold, you go against what's popular, all of a sudden you're what? You're not on the inside. You're on the outside. And that's what God is saying. He's saying, man, I'm not setting up to be an insider. I already knew I'm an outsider because I'm God. I don't need affirmation from people. See, kids that need that, they're called affable. It means that you need people to like you. And that's normal because most people want other people's acceptance. But God is saying, man, not at the expense of my own. That if you care so much about what other people think, and you start shutting off what God thinks, then you're going to lose your identity that God has given you, given access to you through His Word. So He says here, if you were of the world would love you as its own. However, because you are not of the world, but I've chosen you out of the world. Here, I want you guys to say chosen. Say it louder. All right. We see in Scriptures it says chosen. We see this word again. That God has chosen you out of the world. Each and every single person to have a God experience, to have a Christ experience, Christ had to call out in that person's life. He had to show up. And God shows up in every single person's life. It's whether or not you accept it. It's whether or not you respond to the calling that God has placed in your life. And so we see here, because you are not of the world, but I've chosen you out of it, the world hates you. It says this, remember the word that I spoke to you. A slave is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours. But they will do all these things to you on account of my name, because they don't know the one who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sinned. Now they have no excuse for their sin. The one who hates me also hates my Father. You guys got to understand, right now, you guys, do you have to leave or really not the time, but that's next time. Just we go through this stuff, and we see here in Scriptures, guys, it says this, but they do all these things to keep on account of my name. So we see this convoluted message that's being spoken and intertwined into the process of the world. That there's this hate message going on from the world, and there's this love message going on through Christ. But what does the world try to do to the message of Christ? Every single channel I turn on, HBO, Fox News, CNN, there is a message that is being intertwined from people to make Christians out to look like the weirdos of the world, like the crazy people of the world. Because there's a faith component. Because there's something that they believe